Hi, good morning slash afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Um, we'll start the webinar in a minute or two, just because I'm sure we'll have some people coming in a little bit later. But as you're aware, this webinar is hosted by the Dyslexia Association of London, and it's all about leaving your 9 to 5 with Simon Lacey, who's a dyslexic consultant, and he's going to share his expertise with us today on everything that he's learned on his own journey. So if you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to put them in the chat box. Our chat box is going to be open throughout. Additionally, we'll try to leave some time at the end for some questions as well. But if you have any feedback during, I'm going to be monitoring that. I'll go in the background during the webinar, but I will be here to monitor the chat box, and I will let Simon take over. So yeah, Simon, without further ado, thank you for being here, and I'll let you introduce yourself and also get started on your presentation.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for that, Grace, and thanks everybody for joining today. As Grace has said, please don't be shy about putting the questions in as we go. Like I'm sure many of you, my short-term memory is fairly limited. So if I don't ask the question as I'm going, I tend to forget, and then it will disappear somewhere in my head until later on today. So don't be shy about asking those questions. I'm hoping everyone can see my screen now, because I had some issues getting the sheet screen to share effectively earlier on, but hopefully we're there now. This is a highly personal journey for me. I was really keen that I don't sit here and tell you things that you can read in books or that you can find in podcasts, etc. Because there's no point. You can go ahead and do that in your own time. What I wanted to do is share what my experience has been, and my experience has been incredibly imperfect. But then most of us are imperfect, and some of those bumps in the road are things that have really helped me learn and grow as an individual. So I'm Simon Lacey. By way of very short, I did laugh because Grace contacted me and said, "Can you send me a photo to promote the webinar?" And like a lot of dyslexics, I never quite got round to responding to that particular email. So Grace took my LinkedIn photo, which is actually a constant reminder of what my old life was like, which is quite funny. This photo here is much more representative of how I live my life now and how I feel about my life, actually. And so in terms of my background, that I'm, just so hopefully you get some confidence, I'm not some random bloke who's walked in from the street. I worked for a number of years in the NHS before taking voluntary redundancy after basically experiencing a breakdown because of overwork. Rebuilt my life from there and ended up working at the Bank of England, which was an amazing experience. I'm sure you'd acknowledge that working in such a historic environment was fantastic. One of the few places you can work in the world where if they put your name on an envelope where you work and post it anywhere in the world, the letter will end up on your desk. I've been working in information security and cyber security for about 25 years, I guess. I always said it's 20 years and then realised it's actually close to 25 now. And I was diagnosed with dyslexia quite late in life. So I was diagnosed at 47 years of age while I was at the Bank of England, when my boss said to me, I think we should pay for you to have an assessment. And that really changed my life for the better. And hopefully you'll see that as we go through this session today. I've been self-employed for approximately 6 years now. If you think back that 5 years ago was COVID, and obviously it's been self-employed during COVID was something of a nightmare. I had no income. I wasn't entitled to any government support, etc. But again, that was a huge learning experience in terms of how I could manage my life in ways that were positive for me. And six years ago, certainly when I left the NHS, but also 6 years ago, I lacked confidence, low self-esteem, and I thought I had little of value to offer. And I didn't much like my life, if I'm brutally honest. But my life is incredibly different now from where I was then. And it's been this journey through self-employment, through learning so much from that has allowed me to become the person I am today. And It's not easy, but it's certainly been a rewarding journey to where I am right now. I guess one of the fundamental things that people ask themselves is it time to leave your job? You know, should I leave? Should I go and have a look at something else? Should I take myself down another path? And there is huge amounts of uncertainty about that. I know, sort of as something of a poster boy of dyslexia. People always point to Richard Branson and say, "Oh, entrepreneurs are, dyslexics and they've got all these wonderful skills, etc." And that's true. Dyslexia has some skills that have been really valuable to me and that I've developed. Um, but it still doesn't make it an easy journey, particularly if you have a family, if you have a mortgage, if you have bills to pay, like I guess all of us or most of us on this call will have to do. This is still quite a difficult balancing act about where and when you decide to take that plunge. Now, the building on the right hand side, you'll see that that's where I used to work, and I still remember with absolute clarity my last day before I handed my notice in there, walking through the front door into the tiled flooring with the mosaics on the floor. Such a beautiful building to have the pleasure to work in. But in terms of working through how you think it's time for you to move on, and please, if I am talking too fast, drop a line in the chat box there. That's something of a habit of mine to talk a little bit too quickly. I was incredibly unhappy, very, very frustrated with what my work life entailed, and also what my home life entailed at this point. The early starts to catch a train into central London, particularly through the time where I didn't understand I was dyslexic. So if my train changed platforms, that was quite difficult for me to process to work out where my next platform was. Or if I missed my train, it was a different platform. So they're all stresses and all burnt lots of energy from me. I would routinely not sleep on a Sunday night. I would self-medicate with alcohol in a way to help block out some of these feelings that I was feeling. A very low, seriously poor quality of life. So that was working in an environment that was comparatively supportive of its staff and its workforce. And we know there's lots of organisations that are far worse than that. And I was listening to an Audible book yesterday when I went out to go and get some lunch from the shop. If around it was like modern Buddhism or something. If it hurts to pinch yourself, then stop pinching yourself. And I thought that was a great line because that was kind of the situation I found myself in. I was pinching myself every day to go to work. And really beyond my salary at the end of the month, I was getting not that much from it, other than all these feelings of frustration and lacking that quality of life that I was looking for. And at one time when our daughter was younger, because car parking is expensive at stations, it'd be a case of getting daughter out of bed, and I'd be given a lift by she's my wife now, but my partner then, to drop me off at the station. So it really, well, for none of us, was a great quality of life. But then one day I walked into work and found a slot in my boss's diary and said to them, I'm going to leave. I then had to ring Hannah, my partner, and say, I've just handed my notice in. And she said, oh, that's lovely. What are you going to do? I said, I have no idea. Now, a lot of people there was all sorts of different people there who had all sorts of different views about that, whether that was a good thing or a bad thing. Some people were openly critical of that decision. But the bottom line is I'd got to the point where I didn't want to live the life I was living anymore. And so there was no real plan. I quite literally made that step from being employed to being self-employed, almost not quite on a whim, but it was a very much a spontaneous decision. And what really struck me with the benefit of hindsight, as I sit here now, six years later, is that how my mindset, and again, I'm sure lots of you have seen this slide before, and perhaps read about it in books and whatever, and the fact you engage with webinars like this suggests that you're quite interested in this development piece. My mindset was incredibly fixed, perhaps more so when I was in the NHS, when I had a breakdown, I had to rebuild my life from effectively nothing. My mindset was incredibly fixed. So I had failure failure is a limit of my abilities. I'm not good at it, or I can't learn new things. I don't like to be challenged, and if I was challenged about things, I'd get quite animated about it, because how dare you question? And really, that list there is almost all the things I could have written down there on the right hand side there in the grey. But that sense of taking that step into the world of self-employment, really the growth mindset is what you have to move towards. And many of you will be starting to do that. But if you are self-employed, you almost all those things on the right hand side you have to expunge from your memory, because on work strategies of changing those. Because you will encounter all those things, you will encounter all those challenges, and if you think your ability, you're limited by your ability, you won't grow as a self-employed person. You won't be able to do the work that you probably are capable of, but you don't think you are. And a huge part of that was coming through my diagnosis of dyslexia. So where I couldn't work out why I didn't fit in, I couldn't work out why I couldn't do certain things, and interestingly, I never reflected on the things I was good at, which we'll come on to later. It was moving that mindset from the right hand side there to the left hand side, which is absolutely fundamental. And I think, if there's anyone here who's not come across this before, the thing that's off on the left hand side, if you can do work on that, then your life will instantly come better. And I've worked hard on bringing those things into life, and bringing those into part of who I am and how I live, not just how I work, but how I live. And there's a hint of that by the photo in my background there, hopefully. And this quote by Jack Cannon, lots of people have said similar things, and I'm sure a quick Google will prove that to you. But I literally had that feeling where I ran to the edge and I jumped. And I did have that conversation with my boss, because he said, "What are you going to do for work?" And I said, "I don't know. I'll grow wings on the way down." And at this point, I literally had no idea what that would look like. And weirdly, the better my mindset, the more, I guess you'd say, the serendipitous events would occur. And my first journey into freelance work was a chance conversation with somebody who I knew. They knew somebody that I knew, gave me their details, and I had those conversations, which grew enough work that kept me going for several years. And introduced me to lots of new ideas, lots of new thoughts, lots of new concepts, which I would have never had. So it was that real courage moment from feeling I was somebody who could only do a fairly menial job. And at one point in my life, I was looking at jobs that were literally paying minimum wage, to literally in a few years going to this point here where I was going to say, right, I'm going to go and see what life has to bring, what I can bring to the world, and what the world can bring to me, and have the confidence to do that. Not easy. And I'd not say that there weren't times when I sat there with a mild panic about life, particularly during COVID. But that was really, so it's almost a bit hypocritical me talking to people about preparing to leave, because I didn't do any of that. Literally, it was that spontaneous moment. Certainly an interesting conversation when I got home to talk to Hannah about this anyway. Hopefully this is helpful. Please drop those questions in the chat box if there's anything there that you'd like to know. And looking back here and to writing these slides to use for today, these would have been the questions I should have probably asked myself before I left, because I think it probably would have taken some degree of the stress out of that experience. How will I earn a living now? I had literally no idea of what I was going to do. The only thread I had was the fact that working at the Bank of England, I worked with a colleague who had said to me a number of times, "Why don't you become a consultant?" And my instant reaction was, well, I don't know enough to be a consultant. I'm not clever enough to be a consultant. And as a friend of mine said, well, as a consultant, you need to know everything. And I can absolutely assure you that I do not know everything. But I'm quite apt to admit when I don't know something, and I can go and find the answers if need be. do you have any reserves? So how much do you need to earn, but how much reserve have you got? So, and there's lots of figures you can go and look at about how much, and I think that's a highly personal thing is how much reserve that you think you're gonna need. Because obviously everyone's circumstance is different. But I had a little bit from my voluntary redundancy. It would have been enough to keep me going for a few months. It wasn't a huge amount of money, but it would have paid the bills and obviously was used then to pay during COVID for living expenses. What do you enjoy doing? And equally, I guess, what do you not enjoy doing? Um, because of how my mindset was, I always thought I didn't enjoy doing anything work related. That was my honest mindset. I worked because I just wanted to earn some money, and almost consuming, and hey, let's be blunt about it, consuming hours, consuming days, but also consuming hours of my life just to get that paid out at the end of the month. And it was a pretty grim way of living, really, because it was almost um, that really was that journey. It was a case of I go to work just because I get a payday at the end of the month, and what I do while I'm there is almost irrelevant. And that, looking back now, was really a symptom of my lack of self-esteem and my lack of self-worth. Um, which weirdly, a lot of that evaporated when I knew I was dyslexic. That just meant I knew what I thought differently. I didn't spend all my time trying to be somebody else or trying to work in a way that other people worked. I then started to learn to work in a way which gave me the most value to myself and to other people. How can you promote your skills? And I guess, I'm sure many of you have used LinkedIn or are familiar with LinkedIn. LinkedIn can be quite good, but there were times during low moments when I would sit there, look at LinkedIn and cry, if I'm being honest, because everybody on LinkedIn is doing fantastically well. Now we know what social media is like. Ultimately, people will either moan a lot about their breakfast or whatever, but actually, people aren't all doing fantastically well on LinkedIn. They aren't doing fantastically well on Instagram. There's photos of the beach and all the rest of it, but there's not photos of clearing up the cat sick in the morning or the dead mice, which is kind of what I seem to spend half my time doing at the moment. But it's learning to manage that and learning to manage that, how you engage that to promote your skills, but also managing the emotional fallout will come by with that. And had some really interesting, I've met some wonderful people through engaging with the likes of LinkedIn, which we'll look at in a bit. And also what you tell people. As I said, there were some people who were quite hostile. There really were three people. There were the people who go, good for you, I wish I had the courage. There were the people who were completely indifferent. There were who go, well, so what? And there were the people who literally were going, you won't succeed, you will fail. You realise that, don't you? You won't make a living being self-employed. Which I think is a really interesting way for people to engage, is that someone can turn around to you and say, you will fail. But I think that's probably far more a symbol of their own frustrations of how their life has panned out more than anything else, I suspect. But it was interesting. But you have to manage those people because they will say you that, or they'll say to you, "Well, I told you it'd never work." And you can't necessarily remove all those people from your life, particularly if it's family or whatever. So you have to have that way. So, but if I was writing a checklist, if I'd done the checklist rather than just leaping, I would have probably come up with something like that to help steer my thinking. Some of those are hugely practical, like how much you earn. But then the things that are more subtle about what do you enjoy doing and what your skills are, how can you can take your skill to the market or take whatever whether it be you want to run a coffee shop or you want to do crocheting or you want to run an arts class or whatever, how you can take that to market then to get people interested in that. And perhaps a really, really good bit for me was it's your life, it's your business, it's your way. There is, as I've said, how I arrived at this point was not how all the textbooks will tell you to do it. They're not how all the webinars and the podcasts will tell you how to do it. I just did it. And it's my life and it's my business and I do it my way. And lots of people will tell you that's not the right way to do it. But I want people to understand that just because there are people who say you should do it this way, that their way is not always the right way for you. You have to know enough about yourself to understand what things work for you. Particularly this is something that, is massive. Change, moving away from that security of having a monthly paycheck to going, right, I have nothing, I have no income, and I've got to build from zero to something. Um, I had the slight ramp up on that. I did have some sort of, I had to get special dispensation from the bank to do this, but do some sort of weekend work with a couple of people that would that potentially would be, well, did become clients just because they were struggling to find somebody who'd help them out. And I said, well, I'll help you out. And it was it was to pay for holidays or whatever. So it's taking having that courage to do things, to take on board advice, but deciding what's good advice for you and what is less good advice for you, what works for you, what doesn't work for you. Um, and that's quite hard to actually understand that, because you will have people in your life who are really, really confident, come across as really confident, and have great knowledge and great wisdom, and are great at what they do. That might be your boss, that might be co-workers. And if you start talking to them about being self-employed, they go, "Oh, I can't, no, you can't ever do that. That's, well, I couldn't live with the uncertainty." Um, and that's not right or wrong. Some people can't live with uncertainty. Some people can grow to live with uncertainty, which is really what I ended up having to do, because that was the path I needed to do to live the life that I wanted to live. And I guess it really broke down into three. And I'm sorry, this is really busy slide that probably doesn't show it as well as I'd like it to. But create a vision. So I had a vision for my life, and I just put these words together when I wrote the slide. Um, and it's interesting. I led with the work related bit, which is not why I did it at all. It was a complete reverse. But then added the bit, and by living life my way. I didn't want to get on a train and travel into central London every day. I didn't want to go and sit in a massive open plan office. And I'm sure some of you, as fellow dyslexics, understand this, with the noise that goes on, the distraction that means that getting anything done that involves concentration is impossible. I didn't want, and I used to say this, and I used to get told repeatedly, I can't say that, but actually the fact you have to book you have to ask somebody else for permission to have a day off. Um, and that was that's inhumane for me. There are days now I understand that I was feeling incredibly dyslexic, and actually I was never going to achieve very much. I needed to have some downtime just to build that strength up again. Now, I'm not saying that everyone could just turn around and say, I'm not going to work tomorrow, because you'd have chaos in Tesco's or your GP practice or the hospital, or booking your airline pilot size having a day off, you're not going to bother turning up. I appreciate it's not like that, but that need for some flexibility. I've got a question coming here, Grace. I don't know if I can see it. Can I? Um,
Let me see
oh,
if
there you
I
go. That's okay.
can.
Don't worry. We've got a question here. Do you feel that you could hide your disability working?
Probably
Sorry, but I've got
working for yourself.
working for myself. Okay. Um, the good thing about what being okay, two things to unpack there. One is that when I got diagnosed, I made a conscious decision that I would not hide the fact I'm dyslexic, because I'm not embarrassed about it. I'm dyslexic. My brain works in a different way. My dad was also dyslexic, never knew. He worked in the day when he'd have a PA or a secretary do the typing, he'd dictate things. I look back when he passed away, going through his letters and stuff that he had, it's clearly how dyslexic he was. The world has changed. I'm not embarrassed about being dyslexic. And I've told people in interviews, I've told clients I'm working with, I'm dyslexic, because it's not anything. I'm proud is probably the wrong word, but it gives me the skills that I need. So I've never felt the need to hide that. I'm because it's not something that I really enters my head. However, we'll come on to some things that you might need to think about in terms of managing some of your things you're less good at in terms of dyslexia, which is sort of this next point here, really. Understanding your strengths and weaknesses. We've all got them, whether you're dyslexic or whether you're not, whether you're ADHD or ASD or whatever, we all have strengths and weaknesses. And I spent far too much of my life focusing only on my weaknesses and not acknowledging my strengths. And I think that's a bit of a human thing, because if you do something every day, you don't recognize that as a skill because you do it every day. Whereas your weaknesses, you always focus on, and people will point out your weaknesses. Oh, you were late to another meeting, Simon. Yeah, I'm fairly late to things quite often. I the first interview I had for when I went to when I was freelancing and being self-employed was with an organization, and I turned up on the wrong day. That and again, that maybe that's a familiar story to you. I turned up a day early, which is incredibly unusual for me. I turned up on a day early. I thought I'd got away with it because it was one of these really just shared offices type things. Um, I realised I was there on the wrong day, tried to sneak out and bumped into them at the door, so just been out to go and get a coffee. And I made some excuse about why I was there a day early. And then the following day when we met, I explained to say, hey, that was a dyslexic moment. I just got really confused. But it is important to have that understanding, and I have used my dyslexia assessment to help me work out what my strengths, some of my strengths and weaknesses are. As I said at the beginning about sort of questions, um, I, answer them now because I know what it's like. I'll sit there and go, oh, I've got a question. Wait to the end, and gets to the end, I go, wow, what was it? It's gone. So my short-term memory is in something like the bottom 20% of the population, sort of 10% or something. I can't remember now. But I used that knowledge that came through my assessment to help me understand those weaknesses and to appreciate my strengths more, which we'll come to in a second. Another question here: how do you manage when people are at you? I'm going to try and be polite now. I don't care. I literally don't care. It's about me and how I think. Um, an example of, and I also appreciate that not everyone is as confident with it as me, or has got to the place of self-acceptance that I have, or maybe that was an age thing because I got diagnosed later. I don't know, but I really don't care. So an example of that, I went to work with a major high street firm to do. It was actually on the day that It was actually on the day that COVID, that people were invoking business continuity plans for COVID. So that tells you when it was. So I was on their side, and I'm doing this cybersecurity assessment, 500 odd questions, going through these, asking questions of them, challenging their answers, all that kind of good stuff. And a woman in the room kept correcting me on my spelling. And it was slowing everything down. So people were in that space of thinking about what they thought their issues were with cybersecurity. And so, oh no, you spelled that wrong. Oh, you spelled that wrong. And I just pushed my keyboard away, put my hands on the desk and said, look, I'm dyslexic. You can tell me where I spelled all these things wrong, and we can do, but I said, this will make it really painful for everybody here. I don't care if you correct me because I'll just type it again. But it's going to slow it all down. Let's focus on getting the information because I can sort out all, hey, Grammarly, right? But, I can sort all this stuff out when I finish. I do think as dyslexics, we almost feel embarrassed about it, and embarrassed to tell people that, if someone rolls their eyes at me, well, that's their issue, not mine. I'm living my life and I'm enjoying my life. Sorry, I hope that answers the question. I know it's a bit of a long-winded answer, but hopefully that gives you some kind of how and given who I work with a number of Fortune 500 companies. I work with companies all over the globe, big companies, small companies. I've just finished a project for a really well-known fast food organization. It doesn't stop me. None of this stops me. And focus on what matters most. So again, we all know that the reality of the life are, unless you're really fortunate or you've inherited money off somebody or you've won the lottery, most of us have to earn a living, right? We might like to just tend to vegetables and swap those to fill the car or petrol or whatever, but it really doesn't work like that just yet. But I was very clear about what I wanted to do in terms of the quality of life and having clear values and not compromising them. Now, we know that compromise is all part of life, but there's every consultancy job I've done where I've compromised. So there was a time a little while ago where I took a project with an organization who I fundamentally disagreed with and what they did, because I thought I needed the work. It lasted 2 days before I turned around and it's like, this ain't working for either of us. I'm going to walk away now. Because that absolutely has to be, I came into this to live the life that I wanted to live, not to just substitute working in an office with people to working in my spare room on my own. I want to choose what I do. And I think that was a really important thing for me. And every time I've done it, when I've gone against my values, it's been horrible. And equally, I've walked away from projects where clearly it was just not the right environment for me to be in. And if that means I earn a bit less, then so be it. If that means I can't have a holiday, fine. But I've had a better quality of life. And I think that's, yeah. I was also sorry, a point that's come back in the comments here. If you start by telling people you're dyslexic and comfortable with the typos, so they don't feel awkward, and I think that's, yeah, yeah, and it takes a bit of pressure off. You know, none of us like typing on screens, do we? If people are watching. Right.
And we have another question, actually, Simon,
Oh, is that?
right after. Yes.
Example about spelling as a manager. What practical support could I give to an employer contractor with dyslexia? Ask them what they need. And I'm not being flippant in saying that. Is that everybody's dyslexia, everybody's ASD, everybody's ADHD is different and personal to them. I'm a reasonably good reader. I'm quite slow at reading, so I don't really need help with reading. But I do need help with writing things in certain ways. So things like Grammarly, for example, is really, really helpful for me because I tend to stray into the informal. So if I write something that needs to be quite formal, I end up writing like I'm talking to a mate. So Grammarly can help me do that. And if you have an employer or a contractor or somebody you know who is dyslexic, you know, talk to them and just make it comfortable for them to voice what their concerns are and their anxieties are about it. If they have anxieties, you may have picked up, I don't have that many anxieties about it, but I'm also aware of some people who really struggle to vocalize that. And there is also lots of information out there to support managers in those conversations, and lots of organizations will have specialists who will support with that. You know, that now we live in a world where we can actually be open about things and things we're less good at as a dyslexic or things we're good at. You know, for me, it's organization is one of those things that I need help with. Another question here. Do you have sorry, hopefully that answered that question, but I'll ask again if there's anything further there that I can help you with. Time period for your day when you are most productive. That's a really, really good question, actually. A really good question. And it's something that I've thought about quite a lot over the last few years. I have a sweet spot, I guess, from about 10 till 1 is probably when I'm most and again, I don't know if other people feel like this with their dyslexia. If I'm tired or stressed, my dyslexia gets worse. So Friday afternoons are kind of the worst time for me to try and do anything that involves a lot of concentration. So I try and save things that are less heavy mental challenge, or save that time for going for a run or whatever. So I have that window, but also everybody's different. So try it. I mean, I used to get into Bank of England early, about 8 o'clock in the morning. I would try and do anything that required focus before lunch, because I knew that after lunch it was more difficult for, you know, and that was even before I knew I was dyslexic. But I knew I had more energy in the mornings and the afternoons, so therefore I ran my day in that way. So a lot of this a lot of managing this is about that being self-aware, and I guess everybody, whether they're dyslexic or not, that self-awareness of knowing when you're good. You know, some people like working late at night. I've got a friend of mine who works late at night because that works best for him. The house is quiet, cracks on, does his work. Great. But it's finding an employer who allows you to do that, of course, which obviously, you know, being self-employed, much more flexibility. Um, I absolutely love this, and I post this semi-regularly on LinkedIn. The most important conversation is the one you have with yourself. Because you carry those conversations around your head all the time if you're not careful. Uh, So, and this happened to be from, I mean, you may have heard of David Goggins. He's an ultra athlete, or has been an ultra athlete. He just run a 200-mile race, which, hey, you know, why not? Um, and that's really, really helped me. This phrase has really, really helped me. And I remind myself, so if I find myself being negative about things or being a bit downbeat, I remind myself that that conversation goes on in my head. And I also use it with sport, which we'll look at in a bit. But that's, it's so fundamentally important to me. Um, and I can't stop evangelizing about that to people.
And
So, and there's a
Simon, we have
question.
another question about access to work.
I was going to come to that after that, but that's fine. We can do it now.
Oh, no, do it after.
I did say any time, didn't I? Yeah, access to work. Okay, I spend a number of hours filling out my access to work form. No one tells you that it doesn't save it. So I haven't yet built up the courage to go and do it again, if I'm honest. And is some certain technology I would like that would probably help me. Probably having access to a virtual assistant might help. So I I have applied. I just didn't submit it because I didn't realise it didn't save it. Which, given that it's for people like me who would struggle with officialdom, was really, really frustrating. Um, yeah, I won't try and rant about that too much, but yeah, my wife knew about that fairly quickly after it hadn't saved. But oh yeah, sorry, please do it. So as an encouragement to everyone, yeah, yeah, great. And that's it's on my to-do list, which if you look at my weaknesses there, you'll see why it's on my to-do list. Um, so part of that self-awareness is understanding, what you're good at and those weaknesses, but not just focusing on those weaknesses. So for me, building connections and rapport. Um, in consultancy, the biggest barrier is being able, or the biggest thing you can do is build that relationship with your client. Because when you're talking to them about cybersecurity and information security, you are asking them to be honest about things that don't work in their environments. Now, for some organizations, that's potentially really sensitive information. So pitching up in a suit and tie and just going, tell me what's wrong, is not going to work. But having that skill and hey, I feel really awkward calling it a skill because it took me a long time to accept it. It is a skill that I have. Um, Building that rapport, building that trust is what opens up those conversations. And that's so many things that in life. People tell me I'm really good at networking events. I hate networking events because I burn so much energy, but I'm able to build those relationships and I have that emotional intelligence that you could just read people the way conversation needs to go. Um, Problem solving. I love consultancy is a lot of problem solving. So this is what we do. How can we make it more effective and efficient? Great. I can sit there and do that. I hate following processes and procedures, but I'm really good at articulating what they need to look like. Maybe that's counterintuitive and sounds like nonsense, but that's I can break it down into steps, even if I can't follow them very easily. Making the complex things simple and humor. Uh, I have done stand-up comedy. I did it for a while. It is great fun. It's also incredibly naked. You stand there on stage with a microphone and a room full of people. That you've got nowhere to hide. But being able to apply humour in some of these complex and potentially quite stressful environments is a really important way of building that rapport and building those connections and using it skillfully in a way that isn't to belittle people or to make it difficult, but to open people up. Weaknesses, hey, organizational skills are terrible. My family, who we're a neurodiverse family, they expect me to arrange things like holidays, flights, and it is really, really difficult. I have to check and double check and double check to make sure I've got the right date. When my mum died, I told some friends of mine about the funeral, but whether they'd come, and I actually told them the wrong day. Which it's not great. It's a cross I have to bear, I guess. Accounts and any kind of officialdom, as the question there about the access to work, concentration and structuring thoughts. Now, but if you look at those, many of those things you can outsource. So if I really want to get good at organization, I can employ a virtual assistant. Accounts, I have an accountant, I have a bookkeeper. My books are really easy because they don't have huge amount of expenses. So I'm selling my time. But I pay someone and it costs me £100 a year. And my accountant costs me obviously more than that. But my accountant That's I could do this stuff myself and learn it, but it would cause me so much stress and anxiety. It's simply not worth it. Officialdom, we know that in life sometimes we have to do those. I've got a direct debit to change, and it causes me so much stress just going to do that, and I keep putting it off. But some of you just have to do concentration. That's been hugely important for me. So how I work working for myself, I can work for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and then go and pull some weeds in the garden or make a cup of tea or whatever. So I can work in bursts. If you work in an office, you can't just keep getting up and walking around. Whereas working for myself, I can go and do that. I can go and do some stretches, go and do some yoga downstairs. So I know when I'm concentration starting to go, stop doing what I'm doing because I won't produce good work. So just having that awareness. And people moan about generative AI. Chat GPT has also changed my life because I can put in thoughts and it helps me structure those into something that makes much more sense to other people. Whereas before I would have to write it and then I'd get feedback and write it again and write it again. Now I can get things right first time pretty much because I can put my thoughts in there and it makes it into a structure for me. And it's free, up to a point. Just keeping an eye on time now, but don't be alone. Uh, People always assume that I'm an extrovert because I do work the crowd quite well, and work groups quite well. In reality, I get my energy from being on my own, so I do enjoy being on my own. Um, I think it's very difficult to start and run a business on your own, though, without any input from anybody else. This was quite a therapeutic exercise for me. I just put down these I was gonna say boxes, but clearly they're not. Four boxes that have having different things that have been useful for me. Support and what that means, guidance, guidance through challenge, um, accountability, having someone again as a dyslexic. Sometimes I need someone to keep me accountable. So I hate deadlines, but sometimes I need people to just help me just keep on that right track because otherwise I'll go off and you and Sparkly's over there and I want to run off and do that. When this bit here, this bit a bit more mundane now because I've been doing it for a few days, rather than chasing that new and sparkly, get that mundane done. Um, Reaching out for communities and mentorship. Um, One thing that really struck me about going self-employed is that the right people will always find time to support you. And I have received amazing kindness from people because I took this decision to go self-employed. Again, a reality of being self-employed. I had a client who shafted me for £1,000 early in my time. So I was kind of reliant on that £1,000 and he didn't pay it to me. Lots of people said, go to small claims. It's like, but I don't want to relive it for the next X months and drag it round with me when I can just move forward. I spoke to an associate of mine and revealed my vulnerability that I was worried about it and I had real anxiety and pins and needles in my hands, all this kind of stuff. And it's somebody I'd known for years, but not known well. And he turned around to me and said, Simon, if you and your family are struggling, I will give you that £1,000. In fact, I'll double it to £2,000 so you don't have to worry, on the condition that if you're in a position to help somebody like this yourself, you'll do it. Now, I cried about that because that was somebody who said, hey, I've got your back. I think you're doing the right things for you, so I will help you. And not all this stuff is obviously financial, but that had to be a financial one. I've also had people who've introduced me to friends and whatever. And there's no such thing, that as strong as social capital when someone says, I can get you some, oh, my friends said they need some help with some cybery stuff on their business. So I'll introduce you. Finding the right people, they want you to succeed. Resilience, it's built day by day. I don't think there's any shortcut to that unless somebody on here can convince me about a shortcut for resilience. I love this photo. I ran the Riga Marathon in May. It poured with rain, as you can see there. I didn't notice it had rained, to be fair, because I was so focused on what I was doing, and I genuinely mean that, apart from at the very start. But then when I finished, I realised how much it had rained. Um, Go out there and do difficult stuff. Go do tough stuff. I was, I'm quite a long way down this journey, I think. I was so anxious before this race. So we got to Riga with my wife. We were going to have a nice time in Riga, see the sights. I was incredibly anxious about going out, and all I was doing was running 26 miles. It's, and ultimately, no one cares if I finish or not, only me. It was a reminder, it was my ego. Um, so do tough stuff. And examples of tough stuff that I've done, or what I do, um, aqua pressure. I went out, I didn't even know what he would have got his called. Oh, better nails. I've seen that. Yeah, fine, I'm going to try it. So I lie on some spiky bits of plastic on my lounge floor. Um, is it difficult? It's difficult when you start, but you get used to it and you feel really good as a result. But it's building that resilience. I've got an ice bath in the garden. So I'll hop in there and step through the ice because it's you've done something difficult and that makes me feel stronger. Maybe people say that was so just a trick of the mind. Maybe it is, but it works, so therefore I carry on doing it. And also go out in cold there. The photo on the right hand side there is throwing myself into going to work overseas, which I'd never done. So I end up, it's not the first time I went, but ended up going to Finland when it was -25. And yes, I did go in the sea pool in Helsinki. That was biting. And I've never been snowblind before, coming out somewhere and you can't see anything because it's snowing so hard. But what an amazing experience. All these things, that was something that my anxiety stopped me doing. But now, great, it's an opportunity. And there's other things I've done well, like taking up yoga, all these things that I thought were like proper hippie a few years ago. And also, again, I'm just sort of being conscious of the time there, but these are all things that I in terms of managing my resilience, focus on what you can control. You lose a client, there's probably nothing you can do about that if they've gone pop. So why waste time thinking about it? And okay, acknowledge it, process it, but don't carry it around with you. Breaking down problems and looking after your health, healthy eating. And the one, if you take one thing off that list, it's one at the bottom. Mindset is everything. If you're self-employed, mindset is absolutely everything. If you have a bad mindset, you are never going to be successful. And success is all relative. It's not about money in the bank. I know I could go and work in the financial services sector and probably earn a lot more than I earn now. But that's not what I want. Success for me is getting up in the mornings and being happy with my life. That is my definition of success. And I have that. I did mention mentioned earlier here about imposter syndrome and haters, um, and how to deal with them. Imposter syndrome, feelings aren't facts. Um, because you feel that you're not good enough doesn't mean to say you aren't good enough. Keep a win journal. Now, I really struggle with journaling. I've got to be honest, I've tried multiple times to get into journaling because everyone tells me it should be really good for me. I tend to use Facebook more as a journal. I just put on random thoughts and people just think I'm bonkers for putting them out there, but I don't care ultimately. Um, Reframing your mistakes. So you will make lots of mistakes being self-employed, like you would in any other job. Sometimes that means you've got to sit there and say you're sorry and you dropped a ricket. That's just life. And there's no one for you to hide behind if you're self-employed. Um, Having people around you who are just good people that will cheer you on and will acknowledge you for the skill. I have my former boss at the Bank of England for that. If I rang him now and said I'm a bit upset about something, he'd chat to me about it. It's important to other people. And if you keep growing, you're always going to have a degree of imposter syndrome, I suspect. If you're going to keep growing as an individual in terms of mindset and how you live your life and your resilience, you're always going to be uncomfortable. And there's lots of diagrams on that you can find out there. But if you keep growing, you're always going to be in an area because all growth comes outside that comfort zone. The most comfortable place to be is sit there with a box of chocolates and Netflix, the controller in your hand to watch Netflix all day. Very comfortable, but you won't actually achieve anything. So you're always going to be uncomfortable. So get comfortable being uncomfortable, cheesy though that may sound. And haters, a number of years ago, when I only started running when I got diagnosed with dyslexia, because I decided I wanted to do the hardest thing I think of, and I hated running. I hate the thought of running. So I decided to start running. And someone told me, you're a terrible runner, you'll never be able to run. That still fuels me to this day. Not the only reason for the fuel, that's not the only fuel I have. But what a great, you say I can't do it. Watch me. So I've now run 5 marathons. I've got into London for next year. So that'll be my 6th marathon. I've already decided I want my 10th marathon to be when I'm 60, so I'll probably need to do 2 next year. So yeah, you can do this stuff. Use these people as fuel. What they say about you is probably more a reflection of them than it is of you. And they probably don't know enough about your life to really be making these comments. Social media is great for that. Oh, well, look at your life. Well, yeah, but you don't even know me. Um, Staying true to your values and purpose has been really, really important to me. And there are people there who just aren't on your team. Ditch them. Um, another question here. How do you suggest someone network when not working for an organization? In my experience of networking events, and wherever you live, there'll be some. There'll be some that are for small business. There'll be some for bigger business. Just go. One I go to locally, or have been to locally in Aylesbury where I live. Um, it's almost all either people with side hustles, people with self-employed, people very small businesses. So there's drone pilots, photographers, web designers, all those kind of things you expect to see. But there's also some more niche ones, like a lady who does hair braiding at events. So there are people there, and it isn't just about finding business contacts, although that does help. And sometimes you might get a referral from it, but you get people who know how it feels. You can sit there and go, oh, really slow month last week. Yeah, it was a bit difficult, wasn't it, last one? Let's have a coffee and we'll talk about some ideas. And people will back their ideas about with you. It's amazing by being that, sharing that little bit of a vulnerability, you'll get people share back, and you'll build these people, and you'll find you. Again, I'm sounding almost like a a cheesy podcast here. You'll find your tribe, but you do. I have found my tribe by just going out and talking to lots of different people. So don't try them. And there's lots of different ones out there, I'm sure, wherever you may live, but you'll find ones and some of them will work, some of them won't. Go and find the one you're comfortable with and something that gives you a value. And these are the things I've learned. Sorry, I hope that answered that question. But again, please let me know if not. Just as we come to the end here, the best advice I ever received from my daughter, who was about 7 at the time. Daddy, you should do a job that means you don't work all the time and you're happy. When you talk to kids, I know they don't worry about paying the mortgage. They don't worry about making sure there's food in the fridge or there's heating. But that cuts through the complexity, absolutely cuts through the, I'm sorry, I get quite emotional about that because that comment changed my life, and it came from a 7-year-old. And we think we've got all the answers because we're adults, and we really haven't. I'm dyslexic. I'm not defective. I just think differently. Quality of life is priceless. If someone said to you, how much is your life worth? What would you say? And you think about that's what you sell your time for if you're employed. So you sit and go, well, my life is worth £20 an hour. Most people would turn and say, well, actually, my life's priceless to me. And that was a really big driver for me. Align with your values, I've talked about quite a lot there. I'm a natural worrier. I've got better at managing worry. But every time I've been worried, like during COVID, I was sat there stressing about how I was going to. I mean, I earned £500 in 3 months. And I sat there and thought, getting really stressed, not sleeping. Like, there's a global pandemic. There is nothing I can do about this. So me losing sleep, I might as well just enjoy the time that I've got off. And if that means, remember that nice the sunshine we had, I sat in the garden more and read because I couldn't control what was going on around me. Be open-minded and flexible. If you go with a fixed view of things, it's going to be really hard for you. I took the view that I'll never turn down a job on the basis that I don't think I know enough. And that's worked really well for me. Because I've gone out and learned stuff. And actually your perception of yourself and your understanding, as I said earlier, you probably know more than you think you know, but you tell yourself you don't know it. And I've made loads of mistakes, and that's okay. And I'll probably make more mistakes, and I'll probably make a mistake in a month's time, 2 months' time, whatever it is, I'll make mistakes. But being okay with that in yourself, that you make a mistake when you're self-employed doesn't mean you don't have value. You just made a mistake. And my perception of neurodiversity is that we quite often beat ourselves up because for some of us that's been ingrained in us from, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. We carry it around with us. We make mistakes, that's okay. Don't beat yourself up about it. Again, acutely aware of the time. We've got 5 minutes left, but I'll just flash this on screen here too. You can find me on LinkedIn. Now, again, I'm happy for any of you to drop me an email or to drop me a connection request on LinkedIn. You can ask me questions, and I'll do my absolute best I can do to answer those for you. Because if you're thinking about going down this route, if I can help you, I will help you because people help me. I'm very generous with their time. So it's great to send the chat there. We've got literally 4 or 5 minutes. Are there any more questions or anything I was not clear on there or anything that anyone else would like to ask? I'll do my best.
Great. I think we had a good amount of questions during the webinar as well. So yeah, if anyone has any last minute questions, feel free to put them in. Um, Otherwise, I think, yeah, we can wrap up right on time. And yeah, you all can see Simon's contact information and his email there. I know, Simon, you stay active on LinkedIn. So yeah, feel free to connect with him there. And yeah, thank you so much for taking the time. Yeah, I think you're getting a lot of thank yous. So thank you so
Oh,
much for taking the time to speak with us and share your insights. And I think I can speak for everyone where we look forward to seeing how your journey continues to unfold in self-employment. And I hope everyone took away something that they will use for the future. I'm sure they did.
no, thanks everyone for coming. I appreciate people are busy and stuff. So the fact you come and listen to me for an hour is actually very humbling for me. So thank you.
Yeah, you're getting a lot of thank yous. Great. Yeah, thank you so much, Simon. Yeah, it was super interesting. And yeah, we will be in touch. And yeah, everyone else, feel free to connect with Simon on LinkedIn or via email. So thank you again. This webinar was recorded. So for those who want to go back and stuff, we will have the recording available for your convenience. And yeah, thank you again, Simon.
Have a great day, everybody. It's been great to
Yeah,
virtually
have
meet
a
you.
great day and a great rest of summer, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.